Kabir Malhotra stared at the cream-colored envelope on his kitchen counter, his name written in elegant calligraphy. 6 months had passed since the divorce papers were finalized. 6 months since he discovered Sienna's affair with Evan Holt. The betrayal had shattered him, not just the infidelity, but the gaslighting, the months of "he's just a colleague," while she'd been building a life with another man. He opened the invitation with steady hands. "Sienna Malhotra and Evan Holt request the honor of your presence." A bitter laugh escaped him. She'd invited him to watch her marry the man who destroyed their marriage. Part of him wanted to burn it, but another part, the part that still needed closure, convinced him to attend. The wedding was held at the Rosemont Grand Hotel, dripping with luxury that Evan's family money provided. Kabir arrived in a tailored navy suit, drawing appreciative glances as he entered. He'd spent the months after the divorce rebuilding himself, therapy, gym sessions, rediscovering who he was without Sienna's constant criticism. The ceremony was picture perfect. Sienna looked stunning in her ivory gown, her smile radiant as she gazed at Evan. Kabir felt nothing but a dull ache where love used to live. He stayed in the back, observing like a ghost from his own past. During the reception, an elderly woman with kind eyes approached him at the bar. Mrs. Patel had been Sienna's grandmother's closest friend, someone who'd known the family for decades. "You're Kabir, aren't you?" she said warmly, patting his arm. "I remember you from the first wedding. Such a shame what happened." Kabir nodded politely, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Patel's voice dropped to a sympathetic whisper, but in the momentary lull of music, it carried across nearby tables. "It's rare to see a bride marry the man who broke her first marriage so openly. I suppose love makes us do complicated things." The words hung in the air like smoke. Heads turned. Sienna, standing near the cake table with Evan, froze. The color drained from her face as she realized what had been said, and more importantly, that her carefully constructed narrative of growing apart from Kabir had just been exposed for the lie it was. The atmosphere shifted like a storm cloud rolling in. Sienna's aunt, overhearing Mrs. Patel's comment, leaned toward her sister with wide eyes. Whispers began rippling through the reception hall, a soft murmur that grew steadily louder. Kabir watched, transfixed, as Sienna's composure crumbled. Evan placed a protective hand on her lower back, his jaw tight with anger. He'd been painted as the knight who'd rescued Sienna from an unhappy marriage, not the man who'd actively pursued another man's wife. Several guests who'd attended Kabir and Sienna's wedding 3 years ago began putting pieces together, their expressions shifting from confusion to judgment. Kabir caught Sienna's gaze across the room. For a moment, he saw genuine panic in her eyes. The mask she'd worn so perfectly was slipping. She'd rewritten history for this new chapter, telling friends and family that her marriage to Kabir had been loveless, that she'd found true connection with Evan only after deciding to leave. Mrs. Patel, oblivious to the chaos she'd caused, continued chatting with Kabir. "You've handled this with such grace, dear. Not many men would attend their ex-wife's wedding to her affair partner." The word affair seemed to echo. A cousin of Sienna's gasped audibly. Evan's mother, a silver-haired woman in designer silk, looked horrified as she processed the implication that her son had been involved with a married woman. Kabir excused himself and stepped onto the hotel's terrace, needing air. The city lights stretched before him, beautiful and indifferent. He'd come seeking closure, but he hadn't anticipated this public unraveling. He felt no satisfaction in Sienna's discomfort, only a profound sense of relief that he was no longer part of her world. "Kabir!" Her voice came from behind him, tight with barely controlled emotion. He turned to find Sienna standing in the doorway, her wedding dress glowing in the dim light. Alone for the first time in 6 months, they faced each other. "Why did you come?" she demanded, her eyes glistening. "You invited me," he replied calmly. "I thought maybe you wanted to prove something, that you'd won." that you were happier." "I am happy," she insisted, but her voice wavered. "Then why do you look terrified?" He stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "The truth came out, Sienna. Not from me. I've never told anyone the details, but secrets have a way of surfacing." Sienna's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. Tears streaked her makeup as she grabbed the terrace railing. "You don't understand. Evan's family, they're traditional. They think I left you because we weren't compatible, not because I fell in love with him while we were still married," Kabir finished. "While I was working 16-hour days to pay for the home you wanted, the lifestyle you demanded." She flinched. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Kabir's voice remained steady, purged of anger through months of therapy. "You gaslit me for a year, Sienna. Made me feel crazy for noticing the distance, the late nights, the way you'd smile at your phone. You told me I was paranoid, insecure, and all along you were building a life with him." "I loved you once," she whispered. "Maybe, but not enough to be honest, not enough to end things before starting something new." He looked at her with eyes that held understanding rather than resentment. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came because I needed to see that you were real, that the woman I'd loved and lost actually existed and wasn't just a fantasy I'd created." Behind them, the reception continued with forced normalcy, but the damage was done. Kabir could hear Evan's raised voice inside, likely doing damage control with his family. "Are you going to tell everyone?" Sienna asked, her voice small. "I don't need to. Mrs. Patel did that for both of us." He smiled without humor. "This isn't my circus anymore, Sienna. I hope you find whatever you're looking for with Evan. I really do. But I'm done carrying the weight of your choices." He walked past her, back through the reception hall where conversations stopped as he passed. Some guests looked at him with pity, others with newfound respect. He'd been the wronged party all along, and now everyone knew it. As Kabir drove away from the Rosemont Grand Hotel, something shifted in his chest. The tightness that had lived there for 18 months, through suspicion, discovery, divorce, and recovery, finally loosened. He wasn't angry, he wasn't sad, he was free. The next morning, he deleted Sienna's number from his phone and removed the last photo of them from his apartment. The chapter was truly closed. 3 weeks after the wedding, Kabir was reorganizing his home office when his phone rang. His sister, Priya, sounded excited. "Remember my friend from university, Elise Navarro? She just moved back to the city and needs recommendations for a good accountant. I mentioned your firm." Kabir remembered Elise vaguely, a quiet, artistic woman who'd occasionally joined them for coffee years ago. "Sure, have her call the office." "Actually, I was thinking the three of us could grab dinner, catch up properly." He hesitated. Dating felt overwhelming, but Priya's casual tone suggested nothing more than friendship. "Okay, tomorrow work?" They met at a cozy Italian restaurant in the Arts District. Elise arrived in a flowing emerald dress, her dark curly hair loose around her shoulders. She'd grown into her features, warm brown eyes, an easy smile that reached those eyes, an openness in her expression that immediately put Kabir at ease. "Kabir, it's been what, 5 years?" She hugged him naturally, smelling of jasmine and paint thinner. Over pasta and wine, conversation flowed effortlessly. Elise was a ceramic artist, having spent the past few years in Portugal learning traditional techniques. She spoke passionately about form and function, about creating beauty that could be touched and used, not just observed. "What brings you back?" Kabir asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly, I was running from a bad breakup. Thought distance would fix things." Her laugh was self-deprecating. "Turns out you take yourself wherever you go. So I came home to do the actual work. Therapy, rebuilding friendships, remembering who I am outside of a relationship." Kabir found himself nodding. "I understand that completely."
Priya, reading the room with her usual perceptiveness, excused herself early. Early meeting tomorrow, she claimed, though her knowing smile told a different story. Left alone, Kabir and Elise's conversation deepened. He found himself sharing about the divorce, not the bitter details, but the growth that followed. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to believe what I see rather than what I'm told. That's powerful, Elise said softly. My ex convinced me my art was a hobby, not a real career. It took me 3 years to realize his opinion wasn't fact. They talked until the restaurant staff began stacking chairs. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and alive with possibility. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just us? Kabir asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Elise's smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. I'd really like that.
Over the following months, Kabir and Elise built something neither had experienced before. A relationship rooted in radical honesty and emotional safety. Their first kiss happened on their 4th date, in Elise's art studio, surrounded by half-formed sculptures and the earthy smell of wet clay. I need to go slow, Kabir admitted, his forehead resting against hers. I'm still learning to trust. Then we'll go slow, Elise whispered, her hands gentle on his face. I'm not going anywhere. Their intimacy developed naturally, without pressure or pretense. The first time Kabir stayed over at Elise's apartment, they spent hours simply talking in her bed, wrapped in blankets, sharing fears and dreams. When they finally made love weeks later, it was tender and deliberate, less about passion and more about connection, trust, vulnerability. Elise's hands traced the tension he still carried in his shoulders. You're safe here, she murmured against his skin. You can let go. And he did. In her arms, Kabir discovered that real intimacy wasn't about performance or meeting someone else's expectations. It was about being fully present, fully seen, and choosing each other anyway. Their bodies moved together with an honesty that made his past relationship feel like a shadow play, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers drawing lazy patterns on her back. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being patient, for being real. He kissed her hair. For showing me what it's supposed to feel like. Meanwhile, through mutual friends, Kabir heard that Sienna's marriage was struggling. The revelation at her wedding had damaged her relationship with Evan's family. Trust issues plagued them. If she'd cheated with him, would she cheat on him? The foundation built on betrayal was cracking under pressure. Kabir felt nothing but distant sympathy. That chapter was truly finished. 6 months into their relationship, Elise had her first major gallery showing. Kabir stood in the crowded space, watching strangers admire her work, and felt overwhelming pride. This woman, talented, honest, brave enough to be vulnerable, had chosen him, and he'd been brave enough to choose himself first, to heal before seeking something new. What are you thinking? Elise asked, sliding her hand into his. That real romance isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about peace. It's about waking up next to someone and feeling grateful instead of anxious. It's about building something honest, even when it's hard. She smiled, that radiant expression that made his heart steady rather than racing. I love you, Kabir Malhotra. I love you too, Elise Navarro. The words felt different than they ever had before. Solid, true, lasting. Not a promise made in desperate hope, but a truth spoken in certainty. Kabir had walked through fire and found himself on the other side, whole and ready for real love. And real love, he discovered, was worth every moment of the journey.